Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. A Senate committee is calling in the Mounties tonight to investigate Senator Pamela Wallin's spending claims. They're concerned, they say, about the many discrepancies auditors found in her travel expenses. Now, Wallin contends those findings are misleading and unfair. Our Jacques Bourbeau will look at those inconsistencies in detail in a moment, but let's begin with Mike Lecouture and reaction on the Hill. Mike.
Robin, senior sources in the Senate tell Global News Pamela Wallin's travel audit is just plain shocking. That's why they're wasting no time calling in the Mounties. Minutes after handing out the Wallin report to reporters, Senate officials handed it over to the RCMP. Senate leaders say what really surprised them was the sheer number of inconsistencies in her expense reports.
She sent in expense claims that said she was on Senate business. When they were reviewed, we found that, in fact, some of them were not Senate business.
Here's a breakdown of the numbers. Deloitte found between January 2009 and October 2012, Pamela Wallin charged well over $500,000 in travel to taxpayers. The audit found $121,000 worth were bogus. There's another $21,000 which are still questionable and have to be looked at by the steering committee.
I've looked at the numbers.
Remember, back in February, Prime Minister Stephen Harper said he looked at Wallin's $500,000 travel budget and gave it his seal of approval. Since the report was released, the government changed its tune, saying Wallin must be accountable for her own actions. Now, the NDP is happy Wallin will be forced to pay back the money, but Charlie Angus believes it doesn't go far enough. He wants all senators audited.
And we're to believe that with no oversight and with no responsibility or rules in place for the expenses, that they weren't all, or numerous of them, weren't dipping into the taxpayers-funded free travel flights. I just find that hard to believe.
Travel rules were tightened recently, forcing senators to be more accountable. But the high-flying Wallin is effectively grounded.
Only direct or immediate connecting flights between Saskatchewan and Ottawa to attend Senate business are authorized.
Any of Wallin's travel outside of that will have to be pre-approved by the steering committee. In this report, auditors point out they only reviewed Pamela Wallin's travel expenses, saying they can't reassure Canadians that there are no other senators with questionable travel claims. Robin.
All right, Mike Lecouture in Ottawa for us tonight. Thank you, Mike. Now, the audit of Wallin's expenses, as you can imagine, was comprehensive. The document, 95 pages long, and it is full of numbers and facts. Our Jacques Bourbeau spent the day combing through it and has more now on the inconsistencies.
Senator Wallin, what's your reaction to the report?
Senator Pam Wallin has a jam-packed schedule, flying around the country for all kinds of events, and she kept track of it all on her computer calendar. But when the Senate spending scandal erupted and she was asked to hand over her records, the Deloitte auditors say Wallin got busy, adding and deleting information. By their count, the auditors say Wallin added 83 calendar entries, modified 34, and deleted 391. And sometimes they say the information was just plain false. On June 4, 2009, Wallin claimed she flew to Toronto and spoke at an awards ceremony. Well, the event happened and there was a guest speaker, but it wasn't Wallin, it was former Newfoundland Premier Brian Tobin. 2 weeks later, yet another example. Wallin says she flew to Toronto to attend a True Patriot Love event. Problem is, the event was at 11:30 in the morning and Wallin's flight arrived 8 hours later. Auditors say in her calendar, Wallin added the entry True Patriot Love sometime in 2013. But the original had no such entry. Instead, she had written, Regrets Toronto, True Patriot Love. The auditors say Senator Wallin now agrees she didn't go to this event. Now, Wallin has an explanation for all these additions and deletions.
I was advised partway through the process that I should only include information relevant to the actual expenses being claimed.
Wallin says it was Senator David Tkachuk who gave her this advice, but he says Wallin is twisting his words.
What I told her to do was submit relevant material. Don't submit irrelevant material. That's all. That was her decision to make after that, what was relevant and what isn't. It wasn't my decision.
And taxpayers can add another bill to this Senate spending scandal because Global News has learned the cost of the audit into Senator Wallin's travel expenses was almost $127,000. Robin?
Jacques, the question now, how does Harper deal with this in terms of fallout?
Well, let's face it, it's a mess. And keep in mind that the Harper government has already asked the Supreme Court to clarify the rules for reforming or abolishing the Senate. But you have to believe that Stephen Harper's patience is wearing thin. He's taking a huge political hit over this issue. And you have to ask yourself, is he in the mood to reform and thereby save the Senate? Or is he so fed up that he's willing to put it out of its misery? Now, today, a Liberal senator was asked what he thought was the future of the Senate, and somewhat surprisingly, Senator George Fury somehow found a silver lining in all this mess.
So the good that's coming out of this is the Senate is now in the Canadian conscience. It hasn't been before to a great degree, but now it is. And now it's an opportunity for us as senators to get out there and explain to the Canadian people what it is we do and why it is we think we're valuable. And if at the end of the day, Canadians decide that, you know, they want to reform the Senate, or even if they want to abolish it, then so be it, if that's the will of the Canadian people.
And what's interesting about Senator Fury's comments is he's openly musing about the possibility of the death of the Senate. And I have to tell you, over the past few days when I've talked to senators, what surprised me is that they're openly conceding that the Senate might in fact be on its deathbed. Robin?
All right. Thank you, Jacques. Jacques Barbeau for us in Ottawa.